I've never covered a child sex case like it. The abuser, a young middle-class British man.
This is horrific.
His victims, scores of vulnerable young children in Southeast Asia.
They didn't think there was anything that was going on, so they just didn't suspect anything.
I'm on the trail of one of Britain's most prolific paedophiles, Richard Huckle. He's still only 30 years old. Happy times, and perhaps the last together for the Huckle family. Soon after this photograph was taken, Richard Huckle returned to Southeast Asia. Back to his extraordinary secret life of child sex abuse. On another visit home, he was arrested, and the vast scale of his crimes began to emerge. Huckle had used his religion and a fast-track teaching qualification to dupe his way into a poor community. He then spent 9 years raping their babies, toddlers, older children. Much of it he filmed and shared with other paedophiles. Huckle was a bright child, winning a place at the prestigious Harvey Grammar School in Folkestone. But he achieved only modest GCSE exam results. At 16, he joined fellow pupils doing project work in Namibia, southern Africa. He later returned to school, did poorly in exams, and left to study photography at college. School friend Scott Chapman remembered Huckle as a loner.
He never seemed off or anything like that. He just seemed like a normal person, as if just very, very quiet. Didn't really talk about home and things like that.
Huckle began posting hundreds of pictures on the internet, mostly of children. None of these is a victim. A fellow poster was suspicious and wrote this of him.
After reading your posts, I think you're weird. You like Asians, especially children, seem to have an obsession about them, looking for churches, wanting to come to Asia and so forth. How does one tell a normal person from a weirdo? Maybe their writings give them away.
Huckle responded,
OK, I admit that I'm not the most normal of people, but I think the comments you're making are a little extreme. I didn't particularly have a decent social life in my teenagehood, mainly as my school and my friends lived 20 miles away, and going to an all-boys school didn't help matters either.
He was baptised at a local church and attended various UK churches of a particular ethnic, religious community. For legal reasons, we can't identify that community. Huckle helped at the Sunday school and wrote on his blog,
Kids have really taken to me as their giant playmate.
And later,
it feels like I have a split personality, or alter ego, where at times I'm this quiet, reserved Englishman, but with the community I act like a young boy and seem more comfortable around kids.
Huckle worked at a local supermarket and then at a mobile phone factory while he agonised over choosing a career. He wrote,
I'm as stressed as hell. I have no idea what I'm going to do with the next few years of my life. I just hope God guides me along the right route.
Richard Huckle spent a gap year in the Malaysian capital Kuala Lumpur. He worked in an orphanage. He was also placed as a Sunday school teacher at a community church. We can't name it. He wrote on his blog,
After my second week of teaching there, I became passionately fond of community culture and became very involved with the church and its members.
He was welcomed immediately.
Someone like you said, Richard Huckle, who is an Englishman, he's intelligent, he's coming to do us a favour, is what the community may be thinking. Who are we that someone like him should come to us? Therefore, we have to go out of our way to make him comfortable. And when children start saying things, if indeed they did, we don't even know if they raised an alarm, but if they did, then, very likely they would not have been believed over him.
Richard Huckle used a Malaysian website to promote himself as a private tutor. He made much of the teaching certificate he got after a 2-month course with the British Council. I followed his trail to the offices of the council which promotes British business and education abroad. Here he took and passed a short CELTA course, a certificate in English language teaching to adults. He appeared in a promotional video. His teaching certificate helped give him access to his target community and its children. When I telephoned the council, its press spokesman said no one would be interviewed. When I called at its offices, where Huckle took the course, I had trouble even getting past security. There was still no interview. But the council said in a statement, "We have reviewed our involvement of Richard Huckle with the British Council, and apart from his participation in the CELTA course, we have no records to indicate that he was ever engaged as a teacher in Malaysia with us, either for adult students or children. We have no plans to review our interaction with graduates of our English teaching courses. We have a clearly defined process for people who enrol on our CELTA courses. Responsibility for any pre-employment screening, as well as monitoring their performance at work, are the responsibility of the eventual employer." Malaysia is a diverse society, a rich ethnic mix of Malays, Chinese, Indians, Filipinos and Indonesians. We're not allowed to report which community Huckle targeted. The country has a variety of religions, predominantly Muslim, but also Buddhism, Hindu and traditional Chinese faiths. Huckle's victims were Christian. To protect the identity of the many victims, there are heavy reporting restrictions on this case. We can reveal very little detail of the small community where Richard Huckle committed his many crimes. We're driving about half an hour to a suburb of Kuala Lumpur. This is the church Huckle belonged to for 6 years. He taught at the Sunday school, attended services and took many photographs of children. A priest played down Huckle's connections with the congregation. We'd be very keen to talk to you about Richard Huckle.
How can I help you about children?
About his time here.
I'll be spending time here for a very short period.
We think he was here for some years.
He was in Malaysia for some years, but he was hardly here.
You knew him?
Yeah, a casual guy who comes in and goes.
And you know the crimes he's committed?
I've heard about him. Yeah. About his judgment.
You know he was accused of... Okay. You know he was accused of child sex crimes. And how is the community recovering?
You see, you guys must get it straight, number one. He was not a regular here. He comes off and on. And the so-called crimes were not at all committed in this community at all.
But he ran a Sunday school here.
No, he was here just for a short while.
Yeah?
And they were nothing to do here. And the community which he was supposed to be affected was not at all here.
Which one was it then?
Not here at all.
No? Which community?
I don't know. You tell me. Nothing to do with us here.
Okay. Thank you. Huckle used his church contacts to arrange private English tuition for children living in the poorer parts of the city. In one of these homes, Huckle taught 4 brothers and sisters. It's an area of Kuala Lumpur that most tourists never see. British investigators describe the community Huckle targeted as extremely close-knit, trustworthy, naive and poorly educated. When they were told what had happened, community leaders refused to believe that Huckle had abused their children. There were warning signs, but Huckle survived any suspicion. One day he wrote on his blog,
was accused of abducting the girl after taking her alone when she ended up wetting herself.
Generally, I think in Malaysia we don't think and believe that things like this do happen.
Why not?
Perhaps it is a belief that this is a more Western, a rich nation problem. We don't think that it could happen in our own backyard.
But it did happen. For 9 years, Richard Huckle had been committing monstrous crimes against many of the children entrusted to his care. As a cover, he posted many innocent photographs of his victims on the legitimate internet. But on the encrypted websites of the dark web, he also filmed and photographed himself abusing them and shared the images with other paedophiles. In a post, he wrote about one victim,
"I'd hit the jackpot. A 3-year-old girl as loyal to me as my dog, and nobody seemed to care."
He was caught when Australian police stumbled across his online activities during an investigation into other suspects. Huckle was arrested at Gatwick Airport when he flew home for Christmas 2014. He was eventually charged with 91 serious sex assaults on 23 children. They were victims in an extraordinary case that threatened to overwhelm investigators and the British courts. Police believe he attacked up to 200 children. One of the last photographs of Richard Huckle before he left Malaysia, a half smile. Perhaps he suspected his dark secret was soon to be exposed. On arrival in the UK, Huckle was arrested, questioned and bailed. He went home to his family in Kent, the house where he'd grown up. On Christmas Day, his parents threw him out. On Facebook, Huckle messaged his best friend.
"I feel bad enough dragging you into this, as anyone known to be associated with me now will be tainted. I'll call my solicitor on Monday so I can get a clearer picture of what the future could hold. But life as I know it is over. This arrest has broken so many hearts."
At the National Crime Agency, investigators discovered 20,000 indecent photographs and videos he'd taken of his young victims. And they discovered his encrypted commentary on images he shared with fellow paedophiles. Huckle wrote of one victim,
"I was going to lure him into the bedroom and have sex with him, but I think he noticed the trap and fled. I'll get him next time."
He posted pictures of himself abusing a victim on a crowdfunding website, a bid to raise money to fund his travel and abuse. Huckle was re-arrested, charged and kept in prison to await trial. He denied everything. In prison, he sent his best friend a voice message.
"This is Richard. Just to let you know, I'm still remanded in prison, but I've been transferred to HMP Belmarsh now. My prison number is... just to wish you Merry Christmas, and if you still want to keep in touch, then just send me a letter sometime."
At the Old Bailey, prosecutors planned 3 separate trials. They doubted that one jury alone could cope with viewing so much harrowing evidence. Lawyers discussed having counsellors on standby. In the end, Huckle accepted he would go to jail and pleaded guilty to 71 out of the 91 charges. The list of charges to which Huckle eventually pleaded guilty ran to 5 pages. It was oddly colour-coded. The document was heavily redacted, like no other before it. It hid locations and the dates of his crimes. His victims' names were removed, replaced with letters. But there was no disguising the severity of what Richard Huckle did. Some victims he abused over several years. The youngest was 6 months old, the eldest 12. There were girls and boys. Some crimes were multiplied many times. More than half carried a maximum life sentence. He'd even written a guide to help fellow paedophiles avoid exposure. All the crimes Huckle confessed to were committed in Malaysia, though he had travelled widely and worked with vulnerable children elsewhere. Unlike other parts of Southeast Asia, Malaysia is not notorious as a paedophile's playground. It doesn't have an infamous red light district, though scratch the surface and you'll readily find sex for sale. Huckle arrived in 2006 and lived here on and off until 2014. His crimes cover all those years. UK investigators established that Huckle had taken some of his victims to the coast at Port Dickson. He photographed many children here. An hour's drive from Kuala Lumpur, it's the nearest leisure beach to the city. One of the extraordinary aspects of this case is that investigators interviewed none of the victims. They thought it would be too much of an extra trauma for them. The investigators relied instead on Huckle's admission of what he'd done and the videos and photographs he took of himself abusing the children.
And that's the number for the orphanage, yes?
At least one of Huckle's victims had been living in an orphanage. Again, we can't identify it. But I drove out there. I travelled with a local colleague.
Hi, morning.
Hello.
Hi. This is Martin.
When we arrived, a group of children were reading Enid Blyton books. We spoke briefly to the orphanage owner. He told us Huckle turned up one day and removed a child from the home. We just wanted to know if this was where Richard Huckle worked.
No, he never worked here. And these things also not was happened here, I told earlier. The children actually happened everything before they come here. After they come here, he came twice to take the children because the parent wanted to take.
Yeah. So he took 2 children from here? One child. And what happened to that child?
I don't know. What was happened is not in this place, and all was in church.
How are the children now? Are they?
No, they are not in my place now. Only they was earlier, before this incident. After they taken by the Malaysian government, the children.
But you met Richard Huckle?
Yes, I met him twice to take the children. With the under the mother concern.
And what was he like?
He said it's like salt in long tail.
Yeah. You know what he said, what the police say he did. What do you think of that? He's a very bad man.
I know.
Sometimes Huckle took children to the Kuala Lumpur city centre park. It's a place for the energetic and for the more laid back. The perfect spot for a selfie of the Petronas Twin Towers. The dancing fountains are a major tourist attraction. Especially for children. Huckle took innocent pictures of the youngsters he brought here. These are photographs of one of his victims, a girl of perhaps 7 or 8. She's smiling for his camera. Huckle wrote about her, spent most of the week looking after her, as nobody else will. On the charge sheet, this victim is child B. Huckle admitted raping her when she was 10 and 11 years old and carrying out other serious sex assaults on her from the age of 6. But police believe he did much more to her. Huckle shared abuse pictures of her on the dark web and wrote,
"It's quite amazing to have stuck with the same child lover for so many years, and I hope, from the images you have seen, enjoyed watching her grow. It's not often in child porn you can compare the bodies of a 5-year-old and a 12-year-old that are the same girl. I'm sure I'll have plenty more sex with her in the future."
After Huckle's confession, British investigators engaged a child protection charity to help it approach the community to explain what had happened to its children. But the charity workers said they weren't told any of the details of Huckle's crimes. I showed them.
You've got a very extensive list here. Very, 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 very detailed.
This is what he's admitted and what he will be sentenced for.
We were actually approached by the British police back in December 2014. And they didn't give us much information. So we went in there really with nothing. So we went in there and approached the communities as an NGO, doing prevention, sexual abuse work, child sexual abuse work, and working with communities, giving them safety workshops and talks to parents and to the community leaders.
But without telling them something had happened?
Absolutely no information was given to them at all.
A government minister in charge of child protection said that she too knew nothing of Huckle's crimes.
As at this moment, we don't know anything about this case. As you said, the prosecution is happening in England and the victims are unknown. And so we would, of course, like to help. That is part of that is our duty, as I've said. Where the victims are here, especially if they're Malaysians, definitely we will help. Counseling for a start, of course. But at the moment, we don't know who they are. It's horrible. If it is true, it is horrible. It's not something to be tolerated, of course. And we will do anything to protect our children and to help them if we know about them.
The UK's National Crime Agency insisted it did alert the Malaysian authorities as soon as it had identified Huckle and before it arrested him in 2014. The agency also said it had removed images of Huckle's victims from 5 social media sites and was working tirelessly to take down all others.
We painstakingly analysed minute detail of what he was saying and the photographs he was taking. And as a result of that, we found that the location of the abuse was happening in Malaysia. Richard Huckle groomed those children, and he groomed them to a point that he was certain that no matter what he did to them, they would not tell their parents of the abuse that they were suffering from him.
In Huckle's hometown, news of his crimes have shocked his friends and acquaintances. They're trying to understand the enormity of what he did.
There's a lot of children. We're talking a baby here.
6 months old.
It scares me. The fact that someone can change so quickly. I'm genuinely shocked. It makes you feel sick. And like a couple of the other guys that we were friends with have kids in this age range. I mean, they're a little bit older than mine, but the fact that 6, 4, 5, he may have even been around our friends' kids at this age.
But what of Richard Huckle's family? How have they reacted? It appears his parents sold up and moved away as soon as they could. His elder brother did not want to discuss him. Huckle's sister-in-law told me,
"None of his family will speak about him. None of us ever want to see Richard again."
Richard Huckle wasn't an opportunist sex attacker. He was a predator who targeted and groomed his victims and abused them systematically over many years. The judge said his crimes were of the utmost gravity, and he warned him to expect to go to prison for life.